And I'm really like anymore, Jerome, I am like brutal in who comes into my network. And I'm very, very watchful in the early parts of interacting with people, even just, are they on time to our first phone call? Are they taking care of people around them? Are they taking care of me? And I don't mean that they owe me to take care of me, but if I help them in some way and they don't reciprocate, they don't owe me that, right? But I watch whether they do it or not. Do they feel like they should?
As an operator, I know other investors are romanticizing multifamily investing, and I'm looking to learn from other investors' mistakes. I know you are too, and you found the right place. Welcome to Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. Hey everybody, and welcome to Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. I'm your host, Jerome, and I've got the pleasure of having Scott Choppin with me today. Scott, did I get that last name right, man?
Yeah, Choppin, you're right on the mark, Jerome. Glad to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Awesome. So if the listeners want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
Best place to go is our website is www.urbanpacific.com. Take a look and hit the red button on there and join our email list. We put out weekly e-blast, a lot of good, content about, tracking the market trends, economic cycles, a lot of stuff that we're doing daily. We just put it out there into our newsletters for people to, share and trade knowledge, but also, produce value for people out in the marketplace. If you go to the contact page on the website, my email address and my cell phone number are in there. So people are welcome to email me or text, and, feel free to reach out.
Wow, that's a generous offer, man. So, we've got through the contact us stuff. Let's dive into kind of your background and how you got to where you are, because you guys at Urban Pacific are crushing it.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. So, like we talked about a little earlier, we're a real estate development company. So we specialize and really have always been a new construction developer. That's been really, we continue to own assets that we develop, but we've always been really, for my entire career, I've been in the new construction real estate development side of the business. So had started out in the world with some family background in the business. My dad and my uncle Mike were both real estate developers in different formats, each with their own company. So I got to grow up in the business, but not necessarily in the business, if you know what I mean. In other words, I saw what people did. I understood what real estate developers did. I didn't necessarily work in their companies directly. And so that was a real key, factor for me to be understanding of what a real estate developer does, because a lot of people, I mean, you know it because you're in the business, but a lot of people don't know what real estate developers are. People know the term, Jerome, but it's like, I got people all the time like, you're a real estate developer. Like, what is that? Do you build buildings? And I go, well, we hired contractors to build our buildings, but we don't swing the hammer ourselves. Okay, you design the buildings. I go, well, we hire architects, but we're not an architect ourselves. So the anecdote I use is, think of it like somebody who's the conductor of an orchestra. So, most people I think sort of have seen conductors, know what they do. And so the conductor is like a developer in the sense that they'll pick, their job is to pick the music. They form the team. They direct the practices and the performances. And this specific example I use is the conductor needs to know what the violins are supposed to play, right? Like how it sounds, how it fits with the rest of the music, but they're not a violinist themselves. And so a developer is very similar in that we put together teams of people to execute projects. We pick the location, we pick the program, I call it, which is, what's the unit mix, what's the size, what's the density, what's the format. And that ultimately it's up to us as the conductor of the project to deliver a great product, right? Conductor delivers a successful performance and, people pay to, watch the performance. For us, we want to rent units and we want to sell projects when we sell them or have people invest in them when we hold them long term. So basically, just real short description. I basically graduated from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in California with a finance degree. Went to work for a company. I was a subsidiary of a company today called KB Home. It was called Kaufman and Broda in the day, and that was a real estate development. Apartment development subsidiary of this home building company, like standard home builder. But we were a developer and syndicator of apartment communities really throughout the nation. Just got the best education ever there. Worked for some really good folks, particularly a guy named Mike Costa, who I still do business with today. Killer training. Went from, although I had background in the business, I wasn't a guy who knew necessarily how to do deals. In fact, it took me a few years to sort of get the entire framework of the real estate development process memorized and, how to be at hand from a knowledge standpoint to be able to execute on deals. Left there after a few years, went to work for a company called Saris Regis Group in Orange County, another apartment development firm. And then in 2000, left there to form what is Urban Pacific Group, which is the company that I founded and manage now in our 20th year of operations as of March of 2020. So, really just since I was 18 or 19 years old, Jerome, really have had my ambition specifically to be a real estate developer and built my entire college education and career training around that specific, career choice and have never, looked back since then.
Wow. So, that is absolutely amazing. I had the good fortune of sitting on the board. I still sit on the board of the civil engineering department at the university I went to. And
Mm.
there is no conversation about development, right? They're talking
Yeah.
about bridges and roads.
Mm-hmm.
Being a developer, as you mentioned, is like something that is really niche and only a very small amount of people do it. And I think it's probably because of the capital requirements, because you've got to make the money with the project, and not a whole lot of people actually have that capacity. So
Yeah, it's you're right. In fact, I at Cal Poly, architecture school, construction management, civil engineering, business. In fact, when I was there, they had no formal real estate class. They had some real estate classes, but no like degree or even a minor. They're changing that now. I think a lot of schools are, but I think the thing to me that makes it obscure is that predominantly, I mean, it's a pretty small career choice professionally. Like, there is big businesses like the home building companies, but if you get into pure development, say in multifamily space as an example, it's a pretty limited, number of people in the industry, although there's a lot of peripheral, services to development. And in fact, I would say predominantly the people that I see that come into the real estate development business are usually had some association with it before. So, your civil engineer becomes a developer, your accountant who was in doing real estate accounting becomes real estate developer attorneys. That's a classic move. And they were observers of it before they chose it as a career. And then I think the last thing is just it's incredibly risky and entrepreneurial, which is why people can do so well in it, and also why it's risky and you can lose a lot of money. And so, part of what I hope to convey today, talking with you is, what are the things you can do? How can you be as a person and your knowledge and your training and your network so you can mitigate risk? Because once you get to that point of being highly expert at it, and really disciplined in designing the right systems and people around you, your teams, and the product that you pick, it can be risk mitigated. In fact, I see a lot of people who get into the business early, who are new entrants into development, are usually at the highest risk potential because they're new to the business. They may be green, and look, at the end of the day, we're all deal makers at some level, and deal makers are naturally optimistic. They have to be to do deals, otherwise you never do a deal. And then you lay on the additional risk of a real estate developer, and it can be very, very risky. And so I'll stop there, but I think it's just for many different reasons it makes it obscure. People don't even know it exists for the most part, so it wouldn't be a normal. It's not like any other mainstream career that people would pick. Generally, most people, as I said before, don't even know what it is necessarily.
So I really appreciate your contribution there. And you started to go down the risk path. So, I mean, you've been doing this 20 years. Have you made any mistakes? Have you made any mistakes?
Yeah, a bunch, and all tremendous learning lessons, as I'm sure other guests have talked about in your podcast. Like we talked about, I would listen to the Brian Burke episode. Yeah, so ones that I would talk about, as I thought about our conversation today, certainly there's deals we can talk about, but one of the things that really appeared to me, Jerome, was really selection or building of networks that you have in the business as a real estate developer is a key component of risk mitigation, right? So I think people naturally, you know, think about, oh, of course I would want the best people around me, the best team. But when you start to get into real estate development, you go, well, what does that mean? And I think this is true in any environment. So this is applicable fundamentally to any business that would choose. But it becomes particularly um, unique and important to have people around you that are expert at what we do in development. So as an example, it could be architects, could be civil engineers. So you have to select for expertise. And what I always advise people, so we do a lot of advisory work for, if we have a team of people that advise companies that need to do real estate development but aren't real estate developers themselves. And what I quite often tell people is I go, um, the idea of collecting and assembling a team is, I think people are used to that, particularly entrepreneurs and people who run businesses. But what people do a lot of times in real estate development is they'll pick people that they know and trust, maybe like, let's say, an architect, right? And they'll pick the architect to work on their development project because they know the architect and they trust the architect, which is perfectly viable. In fact, the second part of what I'll talk about is sort of trustworthiness and value of the people that you have in your networks. But I really push on people and my teams to talk with clients who want to hire their architect or their buddy or somebody they know. And I go, does that person have experience in your particular product type? So as an example, we used to build a lot of podium buildings. These are apartment buildings. It could be condos that have a concrete below grade parking structure underneath the building, and then your units sit on top of it, right? It's called a podium building. And we were advising a guy probably 2 years ago, and he really wanted to pick his architect. This guy, it's Joe Smith. I don't know. I don't remember the guy's name. And I said, well, what is Joe's background? He's a great architect and he's a really good guy. And he's always done really great on my projects. And I go, does he have any podium experience? And he goes, well, no, he's really good at building, spec homes in Newport Beach, right? I go, dude, I know this guy. I know he's your friend and he probably has given you a good deal, but he's not the right choice of architects because you want somebody who's really battle tested in that podium design, which is a more complex, methodology of construction. And I go, unless that person or that company or that team has been through several of those, what you don't want to do is hire somebody and have them make mistakes and learn on your dime, right? Like it's real key because I think most, vendors would go, great, I'd love to work on your big project, right? That's exciting to them. But us as developers or any deal maker, you go, look, do you have experience doing this? Like you need to be better at this thing we're doing than me. Like you should know podium buildings better than I do. Now I know them really well. So, there's, probably several architects, in California that are better at than me, but I really want to be able to, give that like I'll come up with the vision and the program and the business plan of this unit and this location, this size project, this financing. I'll deal with the political process, although I have help there. But I should be able to give it to the architect and give him my program and my vision. I know what the business plan needs to be. And then he or she or that company needs to push back on me and say, oh, Scott, you want to do this building at this location, but, there's issues with the soil. The city's zoning code doesn't allow this certain thing, or the new building codes for the construction have changed. One of the things we're dealing with now in California is we have to do, solar. We have to actually build solar into the buildings. That's mandated. New, energy standards for insulation, for insulating the buildings. They need to be able to look at me and be able to push back in an appropriate way and open up, a conversation to say, look, we know you're really good at this, but here's these things you need to watch out for. Here's the things we've been through this. In the last 4 projects, we saw that somebody do this and that was a mistake. So this 5th one is yours. We're going to tell you how to do it better and not make that mistake. And so I'll finish with that example, but it's really, maybe sort of in that vein, Jerome, of like everybody in the room should be smarter than you, right? In a certain way. It's maybe said everybody on your team should be smarter than you as the developer at what they do, right? Now you're still the conductor, right? Back to the example, but that violinist should be the most brilliant violinist ever and know that particular music well, and they play well in that environment, Carnegie Hall or wherever you might play. And then they really, just absolutely outperform, but they're doing it inside the business plan that the developer set. And I will say there are parts of the development business that you cannot outsource, and sort of that visionary, innovative part of the business. What's the business plan? What's the next market that we want to exploit? I mean, you can have advisors who advise you in certain sectors of the market, maybe a market analyst, that kind of thing. But the visionary part of it, I don't think you'll ever be able to outsource, and you really shouldn't. So let me stop there and see what that prompts as far as thinking for you.
Awesome. The thing that drove the point that you drove home for me is like, you got to get experts, but then, being a new developer working on my first deal, it's like, well, how do you ever get experience if nobody will take a chance on you, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
you balance this chicken and egg kind of thing.
So I wrote an article. If you go look on LinkedIn, it might be on our webpage under our investor education section, but it was the article was 6 ways to build your real estate development career. And I got the idea of writing this article because, as I just move through the world, I get people who are entertaining the idea of getting into the real estate development business, like from straight out of college, or even somebody like yourself who's entertaining, transitioning or at least expanding the product offers that they have outside of value add. And one of the couple answers to your question, it's actually a really good question. I really, I tell people one of the pieces of advice in the article is I say, get a mentor, right? Now, of course, I say those words and it sounds, like what everybody says. But again, back to this higher expertise thought process that we described. So one of the people on your team can and should be a mentor, right? Who knows way more than you do in that particular space. Now, you obviously have to have some offer that you make to them to attract them to do your deals. Sometimes what I recommend people do is, hey, bring on a mentor, or maybe you call it a JV partner, and give them a piece of the equity in the deal. Say, hey, come on board as my high expert in podium deals and downtown X, Y, or Z. And, for that, like, I will trade a piece of my profitability to make it worth your while. One of the things I tell people is all the time is go, if you're new to the business, go work for somebody for free. Like making them an offer and say, hey, I'll come be an intern for you and I'll work for free for a year or whatever the period of time. And it's amazing, Jerome, because I get so many people go, oh gosh, I can't do that. And I go, I get it. It's hard. Particularly if you got to make your living from your day-to-day career, but there are many ways that you can endeavor to build your networks of mentors, JV partners. That's somebody who you would partner with in a deal. I encourage people, find a good deal and bring it to another developer and tell them, look, I want to do this deal with you in a joint venture structure. And of course I want to make money, but also teach me. Like, let me learn as we do this deal together. In fact, I make this offer quite often to people who are bringing me deals to help incentivize them. I go, well, look, we'll work together in a joint venture sense, and I'll produce good economics for you. But let me also offer, hey, come to be on every phone call, come to every meeting, Come to this, when we have the weekly construction meetings, join us, ask questions, be in the mix of the process of developing a deal. And that's frankly going to be the best education that you ever can get while mitigating your risk, right? And so you hear this theme with me of constant and never ending mitigation of risk. The other thing that I counsel people is to, simplify deals as much as possible. The term I have, or the saying I have, is complexity is the enemy of profits in real estate development. And so when you joint venture with somebody who's better at it, and not everybody will want to teach you, by the way. They'll go, great, we'll JV the deal, but don't ever call me. You'll get people who say that. But I think if you talk to enough people and you find the right kind of people, I would put myself in that category that, look, having somebody who's there to ask appropriate questions and to learn, is not really much more work than doing a regular deal. In fact, if you're the person bringing the deal, you may have more knowledge about the local market, about the politics in a particular city. Maybe it's your hometown, you're from there, people, right? You're going to continue to be involved, like, necessarily in a development deal. But I really would encourage people to sort of set that up in the beginning. So one, people have the correct expectations of involvement, and then just go to town as the person who's learning, and, you got to be sensitive to asking too many questions. There's such a thing. But I would encourage people, read every document. You get the title report, read that sucker, go through every one of the exception documents, talk to the title guy, read all the partnership documents, read the operating agreement for the LLC, read all the conditions of approval you got a planning commission hearing, study everything. That's what I did when I was a project manager working for Mike at KBMH. Dude, I read every document I could get my hands on. I mean, it was the most boring stuff ever. My God, it was boring in some cases. But after a while, I knew every document. I knew what a title report was. I knew how to, obviously go through and assess it and, write a title memo and, object or reject certain exceptions and why were you doing that. There's a lot of people that you can use as resources that are always involved in a deal that, given appropriate, number of questions and time spent, ask them questions. How do you do this? What do you do? What should I look for? What's the danger zone points? Where am I going to, fall off the cliff if I don't watch out for it? And people will usually, who seasoned executives will always want to help you do that and learn that. If not, for you can bring better deals in the future.
That's beautiful, man. I really appreciate that. I think a lot of people think real estate investing is something you can just go do. They would go to technical school for 2 years to become a plumber, but they think they're going to go buy a multi-million-dollar business or build a $10+ million project without any education or anybody.
Well, you can and lose money at it, right? Right. And look, people are lucky. I've had more people who I didn't think could make deals actually make deals. So I don't say that anymore because, sometimes people are able to get it done. But the reality is this is a game of probability of success, right? At the end of the day, if you're going to make money sustainably as an investor, a sponsor, or a developer, you have to perform. Like, even when you and I got on, it's like, hey, we got to continue to find new deals, make new deals, execute new deals. And so it's, gosh, we all wish there's that one deal where you could do the deal and then you never have to work again. Like, it's like the holy grail, and maybe people do it. But if you're going to be a professional in the business, you're going to do many, 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 many projects. And so you have to, orient around really a long-term model of competitive learning. And there's ways to expedite it, getting a mentor, JVing with a more sophisticated partner. These are ways to accelerate that. Right. But I know people who went and did stuff. I mean, even some of the people that we advise, like, I casually would tell people, hey, don't hire that architect. And then the person went and did it anyways. And then 2 years later, I'm talking to him. I go, hey, how'd that go? Oh, it was awful. That architect was terrible, right? And I go, remember I told you? They go, yeah, I know. And I go, well, are you gonna use the, you're gonna find the architect that I recommend? I don't necessarily say use my architect, but make these assessments appropriately. No, I got another dude. I go, is he have podium experience? No, but he's another good guy. Oh, 2 years later, right? And I don't like wish anybody to ever have to go through that process. And that's the hard, expensive way to learn. And I've done a bunch of that myself, by the way, Jerome. This is how I know this. But use some of these strategies, some of these tactics, and pick the right people. Again, back to networks, and you will accelerate. I mean, just the whole universe of podcasts. I mean, there's so much knowledge out there now that wasn't even available, 5 or 10 years ago. It's the learning opportunities are just insane, really a lot if you take the time and are oriented around being open to getting new knowledge and being the type of self that says, hey, I need to learn these things, and not so aggressive that I can just do it on my own or think I can do it on my own.
Beautiful. So you mentioned that you know this because you made some of these mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
What were the 2 or 3 biggest mistakes that you made, and what were the lessons associated?
Yeah, great question. So I talked about it a little bit earlier, but one of the things is picking the right people to work with, and I call that networks or networks of capability, and to really pick people that are expert, which I mentioned. But the second part, which I just alluded to briefly, is really picking people who are the right selves. Are they trustworthy? Do they really know how to do that? Not that they say they do it, but they've actually proven that they have the capability through accomplishing, getting projects done and making money. So really picking the right people to do business with, maybe call it partners, maybe they're vendors, maybe they're JV, partners. And, that I think when people are young, or they're early in their careers, everybody's so like after getting the first deal going, right? They're like just super like aggressive about wanting to do that first deal. And I get it. I mean, again, I was that same way. And so what that does is it causes you to make like not the best choices. So you might pick the wrong partner. So the example I give is early in the days when I formed Urban Pacific, I partnered with some people that were really good deal makers. They were great, like deal finders, deal makers, but their personalities were awful. Like ethics were bad, dishonest, manipulative. And I sort of traded. I go, oh, well, this person's a great deal maker. And I felt a willingness on my own part to like ignore all the other personality issues or ethical issue. And when I say ethics, I mean like their standard of conduct. Like, are people honest or are they not? Like, and how do they choose their own conduct? How do they conduct themselves in business? Maybe is a way to say it. And I'm really like anymore, Jerome, I am like brutal in who comes into my network. And I'm very, very watchful in the early parts of interacting with people, even just, are they on time to our first phone call? Are they taking care of people around them? Are they taking care of me? And I don't mean that they owe me to take care of me, but if I help them in some way and they don't reciprocate, they don't owe me that, right? But I watch whether they do it or not. Do they feel like they should reciprocate, that they see enough value in the knowledge that our company conveys, or whatever the business offer might be? And I'm really, really a stickler. If I don't see early signs of that, what I call obligating to us or to me or to the company, or if they act contrary, I'm super quick to get rid of people. And it sounds harsh, and it is, but I will tell you, as I've oriented this way, and by the way, I'm in a total good mood about it, right? I'm not, I don't push people out unnecessarily. I just say, hey, look, here's how I put it. I gotta take care of my family. In order to do that, I have to produce successful, valuable, profitable projects. And it just doesn't look like there's a way for us to work together where I can see a clear pathway to producing that. And so, therefore, I'm going to have to, pass, or, I can't continue with it, with them or with the deal. And I do it that way because I'm in a good mood about it. It's a powerful way to be picky, to be selective, to make grounded assessments about people and their ethics and their value and their knowledge and their accomplishments. Because if you don't orient that way, then people can talk their way into being around you and being deals with you, and you're ultimately, me or you as the deal maker who pairs up with this person, can be damaged, right? I think even the Brian Burke thing he was talking about, reputation, the episode that you were on with him, and I go deeper than just that necessarily, but your identity can be damaged, deals can be damaged, relationships with others, say equity investors or lenders that you would involve in a deal, and if this person's around you and causing breakdowns or just being a bad actor, it reflects back on you. And I think when I say that, people go, of course, but really the key is to be very, very rigorous about it. Like brutal is the term I use. In a good mood, enthusiastic about like having the best people around you, but also a willingness to move, with velocity when it's not working. Right. And to just, like be in front of that process. So I think picking the right partners with good ethics and good accomplishments would be, I think, the high level way that I think about that, that first part.
What's up, guys? It's your host, Jerome. I just want to let you know we launched Myers Methods in the fall of 2019 with the ambition to inspire a new breed of multifamily investor. If you are interested in getting into multifamily or scaling your current business, hop over to our website at myersmethods.com to grab your free 4-step guide on how to get the ball rolling in multifamily. Now let's get back to the episode. Do you have that conversation? Like, are you open about your need to be able to trust your partners and the expectation that there's mutual benefit in the relationship? Or
that's a good question. I don't speak it first thing. Usually what I'll do is I'll look for signals. Does this person come to me through a trusted part of my network? Is it somebody who has a reputation or identity that's positive in the marketplace? Like, are they known? And like, maybe there's research that can be done on the internet to see what they're doing. Because I think, you've probably done it. I mean, we've all done it. If you're somebody who's new, you might look them up on the internet and say, hey, what's out there in the environment, particularly with, the search tools that we have in the internet. But sometimes, you don't see anything. Sometimes you see negative stuff. I'm usually more worried if I can't find anything about the person versus something that may be, slightly negative, although I do pay attention to that. But I really, where it's like what I said before, I'm really conscious and conscientious about one of the ways that I moved around when I first start, talking to somebody about a deal or partnering or whatever the offer might be, is I will usually always offer a gift. And I don't mean like a physical gift. What I mean is they bring me the deal and we sit and we have a team meeting. I will usually give feedback on the deal. Oh, here's something to think about this, location. Maybe it's really great. Maybe it's bad. Maybe it's, decent. I'll usually give them advice about how they're moving in the world. Maybe they're bringing a deal and they don't have the deal in escrow. Like they're not controlling it yet. They're bringing it to other people to joint venture with. And that's a weak position to be in. You really want to control the deal so somebody doesn't, move around you. I'll speak that. I'll just say, hey, I know you're bringing us the deal, but you really should go get that thing into escrow. Just you go do it. I mean, if you need our help, we'll work with you. And that's a gift, right? Like I'm giving value and knowledge. And, I think, that's becoming more commonplace, at least as I observe. And then I watch how people act with that. Do they, go tie the deal up and then never call me again? Okay. That's their prerogative. Like they don't owe me anything, but I note it. Right. And so usually it's that little signals in the beginning that really, to me, in fact, I teach my team this. I go, you got to watch for the small early signals, because that's usually how people are, right? I don't think, unless somebody's a master manipulator, who's really good at that, which there are people out there in this business that are that way. But I think most people they move through the world in their own way, and either they're good at it, and usually, by the way, the all the highest income earners that I know in my life, the people that have built the most wealth are very, very tuned into this. I mean, they are this way that I'm describing of being, high value to people, but looking for high value in return. They live that, every minute, every day. And then you got the opposite end of the spectrum, which is like a bull in a china shop. People just go in and they're wrecking stuff and they're wrecking relationships and they're damaging identity and they're losing the deal, they're losing money, whatever. Those are all examples of it. And that's another extreme, right? These are, these top 1%, high net worth people. And then you got the bull in the china shop. They're on opposite ends of the spectrum in regards to like a philosophy of taking care of people as much as they are getting taken care of. So hopefully that answers your question. And, I mean, if you're deep in the deal, you can still make assessments of people. Obviously, you probably are committed if you're that deep into the deal, if you're now realizing that you should look at somebody in this new way. But I think most people, Jerome, the signals are really obvious and upfront. I think the difference is whether people want to pay attention to them or not. And back to, young or new deal maker wants to make that deal so badly that they'll gloss over those trouble signals and then they get stuck, right? And I did that, right? So that would be another one, is missing those early signals and then getting out because you're so want to do the deal. In fact, I have this funny saying. I when I was a young project manager working for Mike, I would say there's no deal I couldn't make work. There's every deal could work, Jerome. There's the hairiest deal, most difficult political environment. Man, I'm a good problem solver, and I am. I can make that work, right? I can solve problems. But now I'm the total opposite. I don't want problems. I don't want friction. I want to reduce that. I want to reduce breakdowns. I want to increase odds of success, right? That's where the saying complexity is the enemy of profits in real estate development, because although real estate development is never a simple process, you can move to simplify either, in the choice of deal, choice of market, choice of product type, choice of partners, lenders, capital, JV, choice of vendors. All those go to reduce complexity because people are expert at it. You're expert at it. Now I'm like super brutal on deals, right? If a deal's got any little issue and I have to stretch even in the minorest way, I got to, a classic one is, for early, new deal maker is rent should be, $1,500 a month for that unit. That's what the market's telling you, right? But you're so anxious to do the deal. You go, maybe I think we could get like 1,600. I feel like we could get it done.
Squeeze
And
it.
I'm like, no, dude, no, you got it 1,500. Maybe you should be at like 1,400. And I'm using generic numbers, but you get the point. And I'm so much like that now. And I instill that in my teams just to go, look, just next. Cause there's never enough deals, want an unlimited source of great deals, but that's really the art of it, is to be able to source deals, but then make grounded assessments of them early so that you don't waste time on something that's, never going to work, or maybe said better, is going to reduce in a great degree the probability of success. And that's really what it comes down to, is risk mitigation is just increasing the odds of success by mitigating risk, reducing complexity, increasing velocity, right? Removing friction from the process. That friction's always there. It's just, are you, the self and the developer and expertise and people around you, enough to pick the right deal and get rid of the bad ones?
Beautiful. So pick the right partners, step one, and don't run stoplights or stop signs, right? You see the thing,
Yeah.
not align with your core values, get out
Right.
instead of just trying to force it in because you want to get the deal done.
Yeah. I
One,
would, I would, I would only qualify just saying, I mean, core values, correct. I mean, you need to have a fit there, but I would just look for things like integrity, transparency, good communication, honesty, expertise, right? And I think some people would have expertise as their core value, but they might not. You really want to, be picking people that have good ethics, good standards of conduct for themselves and for you. That, honesty would be one of them. Good communication would be another one, but that are also proven entities in the business, right? And, by the way, those people always want to get paid more. So there's a cost factor. So sometimes I think early deal makers, they want to cheap out Right? They don't want to get the best architect for that product, and maybe the people they need are in demand, but the best, best operators, best vendors, best partners in the business are in high demand. That's why they're in demand, is because they are that type of person. You just have to, as the deal maker, be in recognition of it and be able to give them a valuable enough offer in your deal or in whatever you might pay them to attract them to work with you. It can be done. And I tell people, like, when you JV your first few deals, you're giving away a big chunk of the deal to others, and that's a mistake I think a lot of beginners make, is they're trying to go, oh, I try to hold all the profits for myself. I want to try, and like, I get it, right? I mean, everybody's driven by economics in this world. We live in an economic world, so that's that's the profit motive. But it was so much better to give away a big chunk of your deal and then sit at the shoulder of somebody who's really, really good at it and watch them, what they do, and have them, how they avoid mistakes and how they reduce complexity, how they increase velocity. It will be well worth whatever you give up in the deal. Hugely rewarding. It's just in the beginning, I don't think people are oriented that way. So I don't know if that's different than, that's not like another, component of what we're talking about. But, good networks, good, choice of partners, looking for early signals of trouble. And then, maybe the last one is just being conservative in your underwriting. It sounds, as I say that, it sounds ridiculous. Everybody goes, of course I should be conservative. But when you're new to the business and not a seasoned deal maker, it's really easy for people to like gloss over that, to step over those trouble signals. And like I said before, in people, I was saying at the time, but also in deals, right? Any little trouble signal, no clear story, or it's a good story, except it's one major issue, done, move on, right? I mean, I don't know if you look at that yourself. I'm sure you do. Anybody who's done several deals will have learned those lessons. But man, it's when you're after trying to put a deal together and you're optimistic and you're aggressive, because that's who we are as deal makers, until you get, cracked over the head a few times, that lesson doesn't appear to people. Even when guys like you and me say, watch out for that, don't do that. You know what I mean?
No, I'm gonna do it my way. I want to touch the fire and see if it's hot.
Right. Somehow they know better, and they go, you gotta sit at the shoulder to shoulder with the guy or the gal that's like been beat to a pulp. And they go, oh yeah, let me tell you, don't do that, do this, do that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of the podcast, right? Is to talk to the people that actually have the war stories, who've got the scars to prove, hey, you shouldn't have done that, or please don't.
Yeah.
You did it. I know what this ends up being like, so don't do it. And that end. I guess it was being overly ambitious. I picked some partners in the first deal that I did, and we forced it, right?
Yeah.
And actually know them as well as I should have before we got into the actual deal.
Force, like when you say force, like the choice of the people or the choice of the deal, or both?
The people. So I knew I wanted to do the deal, but I probably should have done it with different people.
Yeah.
Alignment, just approach. They at one point were like, well, if you're not ready to put your money in because we haven't resolved all these issues and actually documented it, then we'll just buy out your equity. And I'm like,
yeah, like said in a different way, like, we'll just take the deal, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And you're out.
Yeah. And it's just, we're trying to resolve some things before we actually get married. Can we finish the prenup first? Like,
yeah. Well, and did you, and not, but did you see early signals?
Yeah. And that's why I call it running stop signs, right? Like,
yeah.
Eventually you run through enough stop signs, you're going to get in an accident. You might.
Right. Yeah. There'll be the cross traffic to run into you. Yeah. And that's really, and so that's, this is, you've done it, I've done it. And I think these are the kind of lessons that you go, hey, look, be aggressive, be optimistic. I mean, I never want to like shut that down in people, right? Because that's such a key component, and that's what will sustain you over your long career in the business. Because, like, let's be real honest, right? This is a tough ass business, right? And you'll get, even when the deals are good, well selected, you'll still get beat up. Market changes, politics change, your planning commissioners, vote against you, right? Whatever. Those are examples. But I don't like gloss, run stop signs. I love that analogy. That's actually a good one. I might adopt that.
Oh man, look at that. Well, now I'm creating a high value relationship for Sky
Yeah, exactly.
down
Exactly.
the
Appreciate that.
The final two questions. The first one is, have you made any key process changes to make sure that you don't have these missteps again? I know you talked about being brutal, but have you done
Yeah.
things? Because you kind of mentioned quietly and then you moved on. Hey, it's a referral before people get to me. What have you done to protect yourself from getting in a situation where you've got, bad partners?
Yeah, great question. So where I would go to is I'd go to underwriting, Jerome. In other words, how conservatively or aggressively do you underwrite your deal? And I think this is a common, again, back to this common move that people make of being, just slightly aggressive to radically aggressive. And so just as a what I call a practice, right? Like an action I'm in consistently, call it a standard practice maybe of how we run numbers and how we assess deals. And I'm really like I'm now constantly erring in really every variable that I can on the side of being conservative. Now there's so many variables in a pro forma on a value add deal or a new construction deal that you have to look at every one of them individually and then look at them, as a whole. Because the joke we used to make at KB when we run numbers, and as a project manager, assistant PM, moving to senior PM, you would run so many numbers, like thousands and thousands of models, underwriting deals that were in the beginning to see if did they work, did they not work. And you can change a few key variables in your pro forma. You up the rent slightly, you lower the operating expenses a little bit, decrease the interest rate on your perm loan slightly. Oh, my rent should go up 3.5% a year over 10 years instead of 3. And you can make any deal work, right? Any pro forma. In fact, the joke we used to make is, you know, guy would go in his office and come back, and the deal went from not working at all to working really well, and we called it, sprinkling magic pixie dust on your pro forma, right? And you can make any damn deal work, so you got to when you approach the running numbers. And by the way, I mean, a lot of people may have pro formas they built. I would encourage everybody to build their own pro forma and to go through the process of building a model and then using a model consistently, right? Because I know a lot of people that I run into that are new to the business will do very much back of the napkin. Obviously, more sophisticated operators will always have a model, but if you're new or you're coming into a different part of the business, like build yourself a pro forma around this new part of the business. Or if you're getting into real estate generally, you're gonna have to study. You're gonna have to get mentors and teachers to learn how to do that. But what the basically the point I'm making is that you have to look at each number: rents, operating expenses, your build cost, your interest rates, and look at them, projecting out several months to several years, depending on what the variable is, and really look at it and go, I'm not going to believe that things will get better. I have to assume that things either remain neutral or get worse, right? I can't project a rent. In fact, this is a thing in the particularly in the big institutional world. People will trend rents, right? So they'll go, oh, it's going to be 3 years to build my large apartment deal. So I'm going to assume rents go up at 6, 8, 10% in that 3-year period while we're building it. So by the time you get 3 years out, you're 18 or 20% up. And most people don't do that, but there are that is a thing that people do, and we just don't do that. I go, whatever the underwriting I have today is what I'm going to deliver in a year and a half. And in fact, you could argue, particularly where we are now in June of 2020, that you should be assessing rents should be going down. Right now, not every product type rents will go down, and not every market will go down. Right. So you have to make your individual geographic and market cycle choice of whether rents go down or not. Like for us, for our workforce housing model, we're actually having good success on lease rates and velocities, and that we're actually able to get better rents than what we performed. But we're like a really unique answer in the marketplace that's really what we call recession resilient. We happen to do large family units where families will come together or roommates come together. And so this is a place that people go when they become economically defensive, right, in a downturn. But I think if you were looking at, one bedroom or studio unit in a brand new luxury mid-rise product in downtown LA, I'd probably, in fact, I've been, sharing this with you. I think that's a place for rents to go down. San Francisco, I was watching something yesterday. Rents are down 9% in San Francisco because people are like getting out of town. Like, what is it? One out of every 13 renters in San Francisco were breaking their lease and moving out of San Francisco. Well, that's not a surprise in this coronavirus era. And, it's one of the highest cost markets in the United States. So there's always going to be a certain underlying component of the marketplace that wants to get out. It's too expensive. But as soon as anything starts to move against that market, then it's going to drop more aggressively. So, I think this conservatism in every place that you can be in your modeling is a really important technique. And then as you get through the deal, as you're actually executing on the deal, what I find is that there's always some trade you need to make. Oh, the rents went up a little bit, but then my costs went up a little bit. And so when you have this conservative, like this cushion, I call it, in multiple variables within your model, it gives you the latitude when things go against you. Sometimes they're favorable. Maybe rents go up, like I said, and costs go up. That's going against you. That at the end of the day, you've got enough room to maneuver that you end up generally delivering the product at the returns that you promise your investors, but you gave yourself the latitude for mistakes to happen in the market to go against you. Now, I'm not talking about radical black swan rents went down 50%. I mean, no deal can, survive that sort of a test. But there's things you could still do. Maybe you don't use debt in your deal. You do all equity, and then you don't care what you don't have a loan payments. You don't care what the rents are. But those are extreme. And you do think about those. And so it's sort of back to this idea of probabilities within a deal. So by underwriting conservatively, as trite and basic as that sounds, a real disciplined conservative underwriting, right? Where if it doesn't make it when you underwrite conservatively, then you don't do the deal. And this is that new deal maker go, oh, I want to do that deal. I love this site. I got I got this, I got that, whatever. Done, right? If it doesn't make it through your conservative underwriting process, then you pass. I mean, over the last probably year or so, we just were not sourcing land parcels that were effectively priced for our model. Now we go into B and C neighborhoods and build workforce housing, so we acquire in working class neighborhoods, so we're a little bit different that way. But still, the market was going up, land prices were going up, and so what it ended up doing is because I kept passing on deals, we sort of naturally shrunk our pipeline of opportunities to the point where we had tapered off pretty aggressively as of February or March of 2020. I just wasn't finding that many deals that got me excited where we could underwrite conservatively, Jerome, and go, oh, we can still make good money. And there are deals out there like that, I promise you. Now you got to hunt through a lot of stuff to get it. Don't get me wrong, it's not easy. But when you finally do find that deal, it's not that it's not hard to break it or, to put it bluntly, hard to fuck it up, right? But that when you underwrite conservatively, you give it the chance to survive the development process, which itself is always, complex and full of friction. And when you find that deal and you execute on that deal, it's the closest to magic that I found in deal making, where you not only survive the process, but you can actually look at your investors in the eye and go, look, I produced good returns. Here's your check back, here's your money back, here's your yield. And there's no better feeling than that. And that's then the natural next step for attracting more capital and more investors. And so like in our UTH model over the last 3 years since we created that program, and we were in a good market, mind you, right? I'll specify this, but, we were averaging 22, 23%, internal rates of return on the deals that we built and sold. We're looking at 20+% internal rates of return on long-term hold. We now are converting everything to 10-year plus hold periods for our investors and ourselves. But because we've executed on enough of these deals in this particular program, we've worked out all the kinks or most of them, and we're always learning, of course, and improving. But now I can be fairly confident that when we go underwrite a deal and I've got my costs and my rents and I know these markets, and sometimes I have to research new markets, but we're like starting to get like this sustained model where it continues to work. And we're fortunate that in the coronavirus era, even with all the upset, that our UTH model is recession resilient, and in fact even accelerating, which is totally counterintuitive. And this is one of those products that does, and they do exist. But we got there through, the early stages of this entire business plan by just being fairly disciplined and doing the same thing over and over again. And it's boring in some cases, but I love boring. I want to do more boring deals. Thank you very much.
You make the most money on the boring deals.
Oh, dude, totally. That's exactly right.
I
It's not sexy, dude, right? That's the early deal maker wants the home run. I got the best site.
Yeah.
Man, screw that. Give me a boring, not easy to execute, because then there's not much value to produce or enough value to make, the yields you want. But a boring deal is, one that's gone through your tests and has nothing exciting about it. No huge upside, no huge downside. And those are going to be your solid performers. And that's true of whether you're doing value add or new construction. I think that's true of any deal.
It is. Keep your ambition down and pick good partners. Do boring deals and you'll make some money.
It sounds funny when you say it, but it's true. It's right. It's right.
That's awesome. And so
That's true.
the final question on this episode is going to be, what guidance do you have for the listeners?
So a couple of things that I'm in really in the last few years, I've really been focused on expansion of my what I call fundamental strategic knowledge. So this would be outside of real estate, but just so I learned with a group called the AJI Network up in the Bay Area, and the founder of that is a guy named Toby Hecht, and he's what he calls a business philosopher, and he's really all about learning fundamental strategic or business knowledge in order to more effectively operate in what we now are finding ourselves as the most rapidly changing environment in human history. Internet, computers, unanticipated effects from things like coronavirus. But we're becoming more and more connected and in a rapidly changing dynamic environment and competing globally, right? And that's the most we've ever been in human history. And so in order to do well and be competitive in that sort of a marketplace, you really have to go really to ultimately to fundamentals. In other words, things that underlie business operations. This would be knowledge. This would be practices. This would be, laws and mechanics that economics 101 in some cases. But you'd be surprised how many people are sort of caught up in old ways of operating, what I call IR3, but sort of the last industrial age. And we're now in the fourth industrial age, IR4 we call it. And that's the era of computers and the internet and competing globally and learning and having to compete, in competitive learning practices. In other words, we can no longer leave high school or college, and that's the last time that we're ever really, working on expanding our strategic and fundamental knowledge. So I would encourage people to really, in real estate, you have to learn your specific knowledge to operate effectively in the real estate space, right? And that's what I've spent, almost the entirety of my career doing. And since, 2012, now going on 8 years, I've really been, a practitioner of studying, fundamental strategic knowledge and how to compete in what is, a brand new environment. 10 years ago, we didn't have social media like we do now. 20 years ago, we didn't have, supercomputers in our pockets, right? Looking forward, where, quantum computing is now going to become a commercially available thing here very quickly. Things like cryptocurrency, the blockchain, Bitcoin. We're in a era now, and particularly accelerated by coronavirus, like we've never seen change like at this rate. The adoption of Zoom was like, we all thought it takes several years to be working the way we are, and it went in several weeks. I mean, the pace of change is incredible, and it can knock people off balance if they're not oriented around how to think and operate fundamentally. So I would encourage people to really reorient themselves to how they learn, and that ongoing competitive learning and ongoing competitive learning practices is a requirement. There's people in overseas countries, in China, in India, that are like competing with us. Now, if you're a local real estate operator in Long Beach or LA, clearly those people aren't competing in that particular environment. But I promise you, a lot of people around you in your networks are competing. I mean, we outsource, for better or worse. We have, people that we outsource, domestically and overseas, although predominantly domestically right now. But I have teams of people that work, in Florida, and they're working on my behalf, very, very aggressively and competitively. And that didn't exist, before, computers, and particularly the internet and smartphones. And so people need to be cognizant of that. Like, they need to notice it. And then they need to start preparing themselves by learning to be effective, strategic, and competitive in this new, rapidly changing global marketplace. And it's not like we've ever seen, Jerome. It is new and an accelerating pace of change, that, I think it's starting to show up for people now that we're in this coronavirus era. But now you need to prepare for that through this acquisition of strategic knowledge.
Beautiful. Acquire the strategic knowledge so you can be competitive into the new global environment.
Yeah. Even as local operators, we're still competing with people in, new ways, that didn't exist before.
Awesome. Scott, you've been really generous with your time. I really appreciate all that you've shared with us. And I look forward to deepening our relationship and hopefully providing some value for you in the future.
Thank you, Jerome. I really appreciate, being with you today. And as we spoke earlier, I'm a resource for people. I'm an open offer of help to you and folks that are, with you. So happy to be here. Great gratitude to you for the invite, and happy to stay connected. Would love to.
Awesome. We'll talk soon. Thanks.
All right, Jerome.
You made it to this juncture, so you really love what we shared on this episode of Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. Do us a favor. Give us a 5-star rating. Give us a review. And share this with somebody who's interested in multifamily investing. Until the next time, the pack is with you.